How are you? Great to see everybody. Great to be here at Dreamforce. This is a fantastic event. Great to be here. I've spoken in the last 2 years. Thank you for all coming to see me for the next 25 minutes. I'm going to start out with a dramatic statement, but I think that it sums up the economic moment that we're in. My statement is that you are all going out of business. All the companies you work with are going out of business slowly, but you don't know it as yet. Some of you may, but most of you don't even know that yet. There's a massive challenge which lays ahead, and I'm going to talk for a few minutes about that challenge, but I really want to talk about how you're going to confront that challenge, how you're going to meet that challenge over the next 2 to 3 years. In fact, how you're going to build what we call at Forrester a customer-obsessed operating model. But let's look at the challenge first. You may not know this about Forrester, but over the last 20 years, we built a very big data business. We actually gathered data on customers worldwide. And as we looked at our data over the last several years, we observed that power was shifting away from institutions like corporations or governments toward the customer. And that shift was being driven by technology primarily, the ability to price very precisely, the ability to gather information very precisely, the ability to buy anywhere. And so we believe that we are entering a period, a 20-year period, that follows the age of manufacturing, age of distribution, Tesco, Walmart, the age of information, and now we enter what Forrester and others call the age of the customer. A period where that power will continue to shift toward the customer over the next 20 years. Now, the customer is amazingly dynamic. For about every 2 years, Forrester, through our research, we take a snapshot of the customer and understand exactly how they're changing. So what I'm about to show you is new data we have on the customer, which has come out over the last, I think, 6 weeks. And it shows a picture of the customer, the customer having amazing velocity forward. The customer is, number one, willing to experiment. This is amazing. We're finding that there's a much faster uptake for new products from the customer than we saw even 2 to 3 years ago. We saw this with Amazon's Alexa, the willingness of the customer to move forward very fast, to adopt new technology very, very quickly. That has somewhat amazed us. Second, we all know this, device usage. This is the device where the customer is now focused. The web is a dying technology. We saw this with Google today with the talk about the Pixel phone, that Google has to be on this device to be relevant in the future. So the customer now very focused around the mobile device. An acceptance of this physical to digital integration. You know, we saw this summer with Pokemon Go. I downloaded it to my phone, and there sitting on my desk was a Pokemon, which of course I captured, and I was off to the races. But this physical to digital now very accepted by the customer, very focused on information savvy, and then finally, it's all got to be about the customer. We call it self-efficacy, but essentially, what is it doing for me? How is it improving my life? And that's the picture that's emerging now of this customer with ever greater velocity. And I picked up this picture off the web a couple of days ago, and you probably saw this. This kind of sums it all up right here. Right? It's all about me and Hillary, you know, physical to digital. There's the device. It's all in that picture, actually. Actually, my favorite guy in this picture is the Secret Service guy looking at all those backs. That's kind of... So customer changing, very, very dynamic. If you're sitting in the audience going, gee, you know, George is going to talk about the customer. Is this meaningful to my business, et cetera, et cetera? I will tell you that it really is. We spent a lot of, Harley Manning at Forrester, a great researcher at Forrester, spent a lot of time last year researching the correlation between customer experience and the ability to drive revenue. And we found a direct correlation to the companies who have better customer experience and their ability to drive revenue at faster rates than companies who are CX laggards. And by the way, if you're wondering how we know who has good customer experience and who doesn't, we have something called the Customer Experience Index, which measures the customer experience of 1,000 brands worldwide. So we know who's good and we know who's bad. As we looked at this correlation, so CX leaders in green, CX laggards in gray, We saw the correlation in cable. This is the ability to, this is revenue growth over a 5-year period from 2010 to 2014. We saw it in cable. We saw it in retail, investments in airlines. We've seen it in many other industries as well. So the risks in the age of the customer really extend to the most important dynamic in your business, which is the ability to drive revenue. So that's the challenge. This emergence of the age of the customer now becoming more powerful and also very, very dynamic, and then the risk to your revenue. This is what I would call an existential crisis for all of you. It's an existential challenge for all of you. Now, I'm older than almost everybody in the room, but I will tell you that in my business career, there's been one growth story, and that growth story has been Walmart. All through my business career, it's been an amazing, launching of stores, et cetera, et cetera. It just blew my mind at the first quarter of 2016 when they announced they were closing 500 stores. United Airlines has always been the number 2 airline in the United States, now is being passed by Delta Airlines. Delta Airlines, I don't know if you know that whole story, very focused on customer experience and on the customer over the last 5 years. They've now passed United Airlines to become the number 2 airline in the United States. So it is an existential crisis for all companies, not just the US, but worldwide. Which brings us to really why I came to talk to you today. Given this crisis, given this challenge, how then do we operate? How do we operate in the age of the customer, and how do we operate in a customer-obsessed way? What I'm going to talk about for the next 10 minutes or so is not theory. We've actually done a lot of research on the companies who have excellent customer experience, who we regard to be really leading in the age of the customer. And I'm going to give you data and thinking about how those companies are operating. So this is not just theory, this is research. If we look at those companies, I don't think this is a real picture of DNA. I think this is maybe an artist who drew this. It's kind of a cool picture. But if we look at the DNA of the customer-obsessed companies, the leaders, so this is, when they wake up in the morning, this is who they are. This is how they're built. We see 4 aspects of their business. We are all customer aware, probably all of us in this room are customer aware, but we find that those companies are not just customer aware, they are customer led. They don't do anything unless they calculate the impact on their customers. I was at Lego recently in London. They're moving their headquarters to London, and I went into an R&D room at Lego, and I walked in, there were a bunch of kids in there. The kids were actually in there co-designing with the designers for the new sets of the new toys. So very customer, they're not taking a breath without asking the question, what will the customer think? Where will the customer go? And by the way, this is not just knowing where the customer is going. It's almost looking ahead to where the customer will be. There's a term in Japanese which we actually wrote a report about at Forrester. It's called omo-tanashi. And if you've ever been to Japan, you know that Japan is very customer focused, very customer experience focused. And omo-tanashi is almost like playing chess with the customer. You know where the customer is going to be in 3 to 4 moves. That's omo-tanashi. That's sort of a feeling for what customer-led feels like in some of these companies. Everyone's data rich. We're all swimming in data constantly, but these companies have now moved to be very insights driven. They take all that data, they boil it down. And the most important idea here is that they're pushing that data out to they're pushing the insights out to the employees, so the employees can quickly and easily and simply change the experience for the customer. So very insights driven, not data driven. Big data is useless. Insights. This is where the customer wars will be won. We've been in perfection for years. A lot of us are in the IT world, so we spent 2 years building systems. They have to be perfect. These companies, in their DNA, is not perfect, but it's fast. They're moving at very, very quick, very quick paces. And then finally, we all have the problem of being siloed, but these companies are very connected. Inside of their companies, they're constantly trying to break down walls, especially between the CIO and the CMO. And also the business head, break down the silos so they can work together to actually focus on what the customer needs. So if you look at this DNA, customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected, if you kind of squint at this, what you really see is design thinking. Kind of the dev, it's DevOps. It is there's some agile in here, and you also, when you look at those four, you may be, well, of course, everyone in the room has a connection or is committed to Salesforce.com. You kind of see some Salesforce.com here. I mean, if you're an SFDC user, are you more customer-led? Check. Are you more insights-driven? Check. Fast, I don't really know about that one. Maybe, maybe not. Are you more connected? That's what Chatter does. It connects us. So if you are running Salesforce.com, run it faster because it may, in fact, help you gain this DNA. And last point about this, if you want to do a little self-diagnostic, when I visit clients, we'll put this list up, and then we'll say, okay, how are you doing? 1 to 4. One's lousy, and 4 is fantastic, and we'll grade these. Fast is typically the one that gets graded lowest by most of our clients. Fast is the hardest one to adopt. And by the way, the average typically is around 2. So you can see that most companies don't have this DNA, and they still have a lot of work to do. So that's the DNA of being customer obsessed. Let's ask another question then. We know who they are when they wake up in the morning. When they get in their cars to go to work, what do they work on? What do the customer-obsessed companies actually work on? And we found that they're focused in 6 areas. The first is they are fixated on the structure of their companies and whether that structure actually meets the demands of the users. Give you an example here. Northwestern Mutual Life, also called NML, insurance company. At NML, the CIO promoted himself to be in charge of customer technology, and he actually appointed a CTO to run the internal technology at NML. So that's a very common, we see this very commonly now in some of these customer-obsessed companies. The most famous example here is probably USAA. So USAA is, I will tell you, is one of the top scoring companies in all of our indexes. USAA has incredible experience. Another insurance company, this is for the military. USAA is now organizing themselves internally around what the customer is doing. So there's a get a mortgage group. There's a buy a car group. There's a buy a car group, buy a house group. And that is how, in fact, how they're structuring. And of course, they're trying to keep those 3 groups very close together, because really what this is about is the customer journey. They're trying to base themselves around where the customer is going and how the customer is proceeding. So structure, very important. Second, so if my clicker was a magic wand, and I could wave it over all of you in this room to help you be more customer obsessed, to get you ready for the edge of the customer, that magic wand would improve your culture. Now, culture is a very big word. We define it at Forrester as how you behave and what you value. We have a very simple definition for it. But I will tell you, culture is the critical factor in being customer obsessed. I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about culture in a few moments. But culture is one of probably the biggest of the 6 that these companies work on. And by the way, culture is mutable. You can change culture. A lot of CEOs say to me, oh yeah, our culture is X. But I've seen many companies work on X and move from X to Y. The third is talent. And a couple of stories here for you. The Hartford Life, another insurance company, Hartford Life Insurance Company based in Hartford, Connecticut. I was with Kim, the head of customer experience there, at a dinner in New York about 6 months ago. It was actually a big dinner of CMOs and customer experience professionals. And I asked the question, who do you hire? And Kim raised his hand and he said, we hire people with empathy. Empathy is the most important aspect that most important characteristic they must have if we're going to hire them. And I said to Kim, well, that's all well and good, but how do you test for empathy? He said, well, we have a bunch of tests, but one question we ask in the interview process is, what is the name of the person who cleans your office? As it turns out, if they can answer that question, often it indicates empathy. Kimberly-Clark is taking their high potential executives, and they're moving those high potential executives into each of the touch points at Kimberly-Clark where they touch the customer. They understand that those executives have to have high IQ around the customer if they're going to succeed in the future. So talent, very critical. Metrics, 3 points. The old business school stupid quote is you can't manage what you don't measure. All of the customer-obsessed companies have very strong metrics around their customer experience and how they're performing, the value delivered to the customer. 3 points on metrics. Point one, what you're looking at here is the customer lifecycle. The customer discovers you, explores you, buys from you, they use you, they ask you questions, and then they engage with you. First point of the metrics. Your metric should be able to address all parts of the customer lifecycle, the customer journey. That's one. 2, the metric should be able to give you prescription for what you have to change, where you're doing well, where you're doing badly, but more importantly, what you have to change. A metric like NPS it's good to know, but it doesn't give you prescription. So number 2. And then number 3, I have metrics on my slide, but I'm going to take that S out of the word. It's best if you can get to one metric. If your company can pray to one God, especially around all these aspects of the customer journey, you will be ahead. You'll have one language you can speak. You may be able to comp to that metric, but it can help you to a great extent if you can get to one metric. You don't want NPS over here and some Nielsen number over here and some customer sat over here. One would always be best. And we do observe that in the best performing companies. Process, obvious, right? That if you're customer obsessed, if you have great customer experience, you're always working on process. Here's a personal story I have about process, which I love to tell because it hits this point so well. I was at LaGuardia Airport in New York trying to get to Boston. This was like 3 months ago, and I was flying on Delta. And if you know Delta has spent a 5-year voyage trying to improve their customer experience. And I went to my gate, the flight canceled, I got really pissed off. I said, okay, so I went to a restaurant, sat down, a bunch of nice restaurants here in LaGuardia with the Delta gates. I had dinner, and then they called my flight. I was on another flight, got up, got all my stuff, got on the flight. I'm sitting down on the plane, and just as I sit down, I say, oh, I can't believe I forgot my iPad. I got up, I was going to run off the plane and grab it. I stood up, and coming right at me down the aisle was a flight attendant with my iPad. She said, Mr. Colony, here's your iPad. I actually researched that afterwards. That was not a heroic event for Delta. They actually built a process called when our customers leave stuff in the restaurant. That's true. They built that process. They connected the credit card system to the flight system to my seat to the seat designation, and they were able then to deliver that iPad directly to me. So that was not by mistake. That actually happened on purpose. And the last area that the great customer-obsessed companies work on is technology. I'm going to address that in more detail. So I've described the DNA of the customer-obsessed companies. I described the 6 areas that they work on. Let's go deeply into 2 of those areas where they work. One is culture. I've defined it for you. I'm just going to tell you, I spent all my life with these companies. And you can smell it. You can touch it. It's different. It is palpable. It's I don't know if it's measurable, but it is there in those companies. They are thinking in different ways. They're breathing different air. They're breathing a different gas of some sort. It is just very, very different. And by the way, I never thought when I launched Forrester, Forrester's always been about technology, that we would be out there helping companies with culture. But as it turns out, if you want to be customer obsessed, you've got to work this one. This is mutable. You've got to work this one. And I could give a 2-hour speech on this, but I'm going to do this in 30 seconds. 3 big points on culture. One, got to be your first stop. I think I've already got this point across to you. You will not be able to survive the age of the customer. You will not be able to drive your revenue as this intensifies if you don't change the culture. This is going to be the other ones. The other 6 that they work on, you can kind of fudge some of those, but this one's unfudgeable. You cannot fudge this guy. Number 2, you can't do it from the middle, and you can't do it from the bottom. Either your CEO is in, or it's not going to get done. You cannot go to the CEO with a good idea and say, "Hey, we need a better culture." Never going to happen. It must be CEO-led. And by the way, in all the companies that Forrester looks at or who score highly in the Customer Experience Index, we watch those CEOs really closely. We read their letters. We watch their speeches. We know them. And they have this. They drive this. They have it. It's in them. And the last one is that, this is kind of interesting. We probably could intuit this one. But good employee culture, as we found, equals good customer culture. An airline, American Airlines can have really nice planes and can have a really good system, reservation system, but if you get on the plane and the flight attendant is rude to you because they have a bad, union contract of some sort, the employee experience is going to be diminished or destroyed. So good employee culture, we found, equals good customer culture, and we correlated high-scoring CXI companies with Glassdoor scores. If you don't know who Glassdoor is, that's where employees grade their companies. And very, very interesting, we saw an overall rating difference, culture and values, willingness to recommend, CEO approval. And if you know anything about Glassdoor, those are actually very large deltas that I'm showing you. So companies who have great internal cultures, great employee cultures, will in fact imbue a great customer culture. A lot of examples here. Here's one of our favorites, TXU Energy. This was a formerly regulated energy company. I think they're in Texas, but the X factor is experience. The center of our brand represents our commitment to every customer experience. I mean, they are just swimming in this. The CEO has an award every quarter for employees who, and by the way, this could be either CFO or accountants even in the company, but somehow, some way, what they did in that quarter affected or improved the experience of the customer. So I don't have enough time to talk about it, but it's a very cool case study to look at. If you want to see a company which has gone from very regulated to now being very, very focused on the customer. Some of the signage you see there. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk about, because I'm running out of time here, is technology. A lot of us are technologists in this room. And I'm going to give you a little test, which, by the way, I'll give you the test, but I'm going to answer the test myself. So I bought a new car in May. If you know, I love cars. If you've ever read my blog, my Tesla S on the left, and my Audi A8, which that's my fourth Audi A8. It's about 3 years old. And so the question for all of you is, why is the Tesla better than the A8? Okay, is it this? One of my sons. It's very quiet. Is it this? You ever wonder how a Tesla plugged in? Here's how it plugs in. So is it self-driving? It's kind of cool. I mean, it's pretty neat. Is it the fact that the car runs on electrons, has electric motor propulsion? I would argue that the real difference between my Tesla S and my Audi is not those two, but it's this one. So what you're looking at here is a notice I got in my car on Wednesday night of last week. And what it's saying is that at 1 a.m. on Wednesday, or I guess that would be Thursday morning, you're going to get a download, which is going to take an hour and 40 minutes, and we're going to download Tesla S. It's called Tesla S, which is the new upload or the new refresh for the software of the car. It's the biggest refresh ever in the history of the Tesla S. When I got into that car Thursday morning to drive to work, totally changed. The autopilot was totally different. The screen was totally different. The interface to music was way improved. Many parts of the car had changed, even the way the car drove. So I would argue the difference between the Audi and the Tesla S is that, and Tesla, is that Tesla is sending me what we call at Forrester business technology. That the technology for me, the customer, is far better in the Tesla than it is in the Audi. The Audi never changed. I bought it 3 years ago, it never changed. The Tesla is always improving. So a major factor we see in customer-obsessed companies is that they think about the technology of their company in two segments. They think of business technology, and business technology is very simply defined as the systems, processes, and technologies to win, serve, and retain customers. Versus IT. IT is the technology which runs the internals of their companies. By the way, IT has to be brilliant. Companies would go out of business in seconds if IT wasn't fantastic. But the great companies think about business technology and IT. And a couple of points here. Again, another topic I could spend a lot of time on. But a couple of points on BT versus IT. This is somewhat of an artificial, overly dramatic way to approach this. But we believe that you should budget BT separately from IT. Now, the reason I say it's overly dramatic is that, in fact, IT and BT are hard to rip apart. because in all of our companies, there's lots of connection here. But if you budget BT and IT separately, you're going to make sure that you're funneling money to the BT side of your business, which is where you're going to win customers. I'm going to give you a number here, but according to Forrester Research, in 2016 in the US only, we're going to spend $1.544 trillion on technology. Of that number, 68% will be IT and 32% will be BT. So it's about 1/3, 2/3. But here's the punchline. BT is growing at twice the rate of IT. So when you budget, you should be roughly about 1/3, 2/3 with the proviso, with the thinking that within 2 to 3 years, these budgets will be about 50-50. But it's important to budget separately because if you don't do this, IT is going to run over BT every time. It's what I call IT gravity. To do that, when you're doing the budgeting, you have to rationalize IT to fund BT. What is cloud all about? What is virtualization all about? What is outsourcing all about in IT? We're pursuing all those activities so we can minimize or not minimize, but we can drop the cost in IT to funnel that money up into the BT world. And by the way, if you're wondering, we're all Salesforce connected here. If you're wondering where Salesforce.com comes in, Salesforce.com is one of the most important business technologies in the world today. CRM, and other parts of it. And then finally, build BT in collaboration with the CMO. So this is a very important point. BT is not simply the province of the CIO. BT successfully is built in those companies we talked about as a partnership between the CIO, the CMO, and the business head. It's what I call the holy trinity of business technology. That those three executives in a very densely collaborative space are the ones who are building BT. This is not simply the CIO, not simply the CMO, but in the most successful companies, they are heavily cooperative around BT. Okay. My slide said before, the age of the customer is arriving, but it has arrived. It is here. Walmart is losing market share because another company is more competitive with the customer than they are. We are in the age of the customer. To use a baseball term, sorry about this, but we're about probably the top of the second inning. So we're at the beginning of this voyage. But this is, as I showed you, when we looked at the customer, it's only going to intensify. The only way forward for you is you're going to have to master the customer-obsessed operating model to survive. I'm not saying do all what I had a list of 4 DNAs and 6 things to work on. I'm not saying you got to do all 10 of those. But you have to begin your path down that voyage to be, in fact, customer obsessed. Ran out of time. Great to be here. I'm going to employ a very old technology. You probably have a lot of questions for me, but I can't take them because we're going to go on to Tom Davenport, and I know you want to hear from him. But if you want to email me your question, and I promise I'll do this, I will answer back to you. I'll give you a good answer back. Also, if you email me, I will send you the customer-obsessed report that Forrester wrote. It's a little bit old now. It's about 6 months old, but I'll send you that report. It's a very cool report. Anyway, hope this helped very much. Have a great Dreamforce. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Distinguished Professor, Babson College, Research Fellow, MIT, Tom Davenport.
Thank you. It's great to be here. So you get 2 Bostonians in a row. If you have any questions or comments about my talk, send them to gcolony@forrester.com. George will answer. No. So in a way, I'm going to follow up on what George was talking about and say a little bit about what we're going to do with all the data that we get from our customer-facing processes. And I'm going to argue that we've gotten ourselves in a little bit of a pickle, and there's really only one way out of it. The pickle is that we've got too much or too many of almost everything these days. We've got too many channels that we have to coordinate to the customer. We've got too much data that we have to analyze. Much of the data is problematic in some way or the other. And I worked in analytics and big data over the last 15 or 20 years, the dirty little secret of analytics and big data is that most of the time we spend on analytics and big data is on cleaning up our data. And we really need to address that issue, as I'm sure many of you deal with day to day. We have too many customers wanting a personalized approach to the business that we do with them. And, we've been trying segmentation for ages. I think now the expectation among customers is a segment of one. But, most of us wrestle with segments of 10 million or 20 million. So that's a challenge. Too much expertise required to do all of this data and analytics-oriented work. I mean, we would almost need as many data scientists as we have people in San Francisco. I know we're approaching that, but we're not quite there yet, if we were going to pull this off. And there just aren't that many people with the right kind of training and expertise to make all of this happen. There are too many tasks to be done in terms of serving customers and making them happy. And George talked about culture. I certainly believe in culture, but the particular brand of culture that people often espouse to me is necessary is a culture driven by data and analytics as opposed to intuition and experience. And we're going to shoot the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, as far as being the arbiter of what happens in our organization. It ain't happening, at least not fast enough. Culture change takes a long time. We still have a vast number of executives who are not trained in data and analytics-based decision making, who are more than happy to continue with the highest paid person's opinion because they are the highest paid person. And they like some of the perquisites of that particular office. So my sense is we're not going to get that cultural change by the natural mechanisms of cultural change. We're going to have to do it another way. And I think in many cases, technology is the answer. I was talking yesterday, was at another gathering of chief data and analytics officers, and I was talking to I won't mention his name, but a senior executive at Wells Fargo. Boo, Wells Fargo. And I was saying, well, what's it like to work there now? And he said, it's a fantastic situation for us because it's finally going to make people in the bank see that technology can solve some of these problems. It would have been relatively easy to check on whether Wells Fargo people were opening millions and millions of accounts that customers didn't want. But the feeling was, no, we don't need that. So in many cases, I think we can start to make some cultural changes through the use of technology, and I think that has to be done here. So what's going to happen? What's already happening? I woke up this morning and I read that Salesforce had acquired yet another AI company, YAAIC, a veritable shopping spree of AI. And it's because in customer-facing processes, we can't solve all of those problems with traditional technology, and certainly not with cultural and behavioral and process change alone. So Salesforce and others started with transactional CRM capabilities, make sure that your call report is in and your trouble tickets and service and so on. And then a few years ago, Salesforce said, well, it'd be pretty useful if we kind of baked some descriptive analytics into this transactional capabilities, so we can know, what are our sales and service and marketing people really doing with their time, and how's it all working? And then they said, well, we can get a little bit more sophisticated and start to predict what might be happening, predict a customer that might be about to attrit from us, for example. And then why not just push it out to the front lines with prescriptive analytics, where we say, excuse me, but this customer has not been responded to in a couple of weeks. Sales IQ reads it and says, you got to do something. Would you like me to send an email? Because you don't seem to be capable of it. So starting to kind of take over some tasks and at least make strong suggestions about how the work should be done. And, increasingly, I think we're getting to the point where we can no longer rely on the humans to do this. We're unreliable. We go on vacations. We get sick, etc. So more and more is happening in terms of autonomous analytics, where instead of us doing the analysis, at Salesforce now, as of a month ago or so, Beyond Core will tell us, look, here's a really important pattern in the data that you missed. It's not hypothesis-driven anymore. It's not artisanal analytics, the kind they have in Portland, Oregon. It's starting to get autonomous. And then finally, it's not just the analytics that get made autonomous or automated, it's the sales or service or marketing tasks themselves. And this is not the future, folks. This is the present, and in some cases already the past. So we're moving toward a more automated future, but there's a problem with that plan, because most of us don't really like automation all that much. I mean, first of all, it has this nasty side effect of putting some of us out of work. I'll say more about that later, but that's not so much fun. How many of you, when you're faced with an IVR system in a company, you say, agent, representative, please, a human, anybody? You press every number on the keypad to see what might get you to a human. I mean, if automation is so great, why do we do that? Interaction with so-called smart machines is often awkward. I mean, I just got my new Series 2 Apple Watch, and it's kind of beeping and buzzing at all sorts of inconvenient times, usually when there are other people around. Why is your watch yelling at you? Siri, you have to say things over again. It's getting better. It's always getting better, this automation, but it's always still problematic somehow. You also, if you think about it, automation is kind of a race to the bottom. If everybody in your industry automates, then the costs get cut out, but the margins get cut out, and it becomes more difficult to be innovative because everybody's kind of programmed in a certain process that is now much harder to change. So I think pure automation leaves something to be desired, but clearly we are facing more of it. And so the question is this historical pattern that we've been seeing over the last few centuries, is it going to continue into customer-facing knowledge workers? Some of you probably fall into this category yourselves. So, we saw industrial workers, manual workers, dislocated, as the economists call it, in the 18th and 19th centuries in farms and factories and so on. And then it's been service workers in the 20th century, the bank tellers and the airline reservations clerks and so on, who were no longer needed. And now it's the knowledge workers, the people who do the heavy lifting of the knowledge economy. And the scary thing is, this was the higher ground to which we were all supposed to repair when the lower level jobs were eliminated. So to this pressing question, are customer-facing jobs next to go? I have a very clear and unambiguous answer. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that lots of customer-facing tasks are automatable, and as I will show, already automated in many cases. But note the word tasks, not entire jobs. We do a lot of tasks in our jobs, and some of them are automatable and some of them are not. And so what that I think really means is that we won't need quite as many people performing these things as we did in the past, but they won't all go away. So maybe 8 call center reps instead of 10, because the more routine tasks have been automated by some sort of AI system to answer customer questions. The other thing to remember is that job elimination is a pretty slow process. Good news for all of us, maybe not as good news for our children and our grandchildren. In 1980 in the United States, I mentioned bank tellers before. 1980, we had 500,000 bank tellers in the US. So along came ATMs to dispense cash anytime, and online banking to do basically anything that you would possibly need to do with a bank online. How many bank tellers do you think we have in 2016? 500,000, strangely enough. So people find other jobs, and the banks were opening more branches during this period. So it's a slow process, but I don't think any of you are probably recommending to your friends and relatives, join the fast-growing field of bank telling, if that's what it's called. It's in a slow decline, and that's what happens with these kinds of jobs. The good news is that there will be new jobs. Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, said it just yesterday. Technology will create new jobs. The bad news is that we don't know how many, and chances are pretty good there won't be quite as many of them around as there are today. So, and of course, if this works, we'll have productivity gains, and we could use those gains to retrain people or even give them minimum basic incomes, all that sort of thing. But I don't know. I suppose it depends partially on who's going to get elected. But this country doesn't feel right now that we're into the idea of guaranteed basic incomes. And most other countries, there are some in Europe that are playing with it, but Switzerland voted it down. And so it kind of goes against the current grain. In general, I think there is no room for complacency here. There probably are going to be fewer jobs. I don't know if you can see this little bear over here, but I'm reminded of that old joke about the campers out in the woods, and a bear comes upon them, probably a little bigger than this one over here. And one of the campers, starts to take off, and the other one is putting on running shoes. And the first one says, "Well, what are you doing? What are you wasting time for?" And he said, "No, I want to be a really fast runner." "Well, the bear's coming." I said, "I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you." And I think that will be to some degree the case. We have to make ourselves more valuable than other people who are not willing to work with smart machines as effectively as we are. So lest you doubt that there's any concern, here are 10 jobs, knowledge work jobs, for which a big chunk of the work is already automated. I'll only focus in this presentation on the customer-facing ones because that's presumably your focus being here at Dreamforce. But sales, of course, a lot of aspects of that. Automated call center reps, marketers. I probably should, had I known what was going to be in the paper this morning, I probably should have put Crux in that example of AI for marketing, since that's the company that Salesforce just announced they bought. And if you think, well, I'm an analyst, I'm a quantitative analyst, no fear, plenty of jobs for me. Well, even that, much of that work is being automated through machine learning. And there are also, doctors, lawyers, reporters, et cetera, whose jobs are being placed at risk by this technology. So let's get into a little bit of detail. How about sales? Lots and lots of sales tasks already automated, from outbound content marketing. I don't know if this is a surprise to you, but those personalized emails I should say, personalized emails that you get in your mailbox. No human actually saw those. I'm sure we all realize now that some program said this is what you wanted to receive in your inbox. The fact that you didn't really want to receive that in your inbox also tells us something about the personalization process. Prospecting, lead scoring, even if you have been to the Einstein section of Dreamforce, you see a lot of these functions are getting built into Salesforce now, which I think makes a lot of sense, all the way through to customer attrition modeling, pricing. We have these robotic process automation tools that can do a lot of back office work. And you say, well, is this true of all salespeople? No, it's not. We don't know exactly, but McKinsey did an analysis to say which sales jobs are the most likely to be automated. Now, how many parts salespeople do we have here today? Part salespeople, I guess the idea is humans don't add a lot of value to that process because 85% of their tasks are deemed automatable by McKinsey. But then you get down to the bottom where product demos and so on. I guess it's good news for a lot of people here at Dreamforce because if you're a product demonstrator, only 17% of your tasks are likely to be automated, and other kind of sales-oriented tasks in the middle. I think in some ways this is the fallacy of precision, but it does suggest, I think quite rightly, that some jobs will be more automated than others in the sales domain. In terms of marketing, marketing always had this kind of fun flavor. You probably remember that old Dilbert cartoon where Dilbert's looking at another part of the office and there's a big banner and a party going in. It says, "Welcome to marketing, 2-drink minimum." A fun place to be for people, but now not so much because there aren't nearly as many people as there used to be, and a lot of the creativity has been taken over by various automated tools, from digital ad buying, so-called programmatic buying, all the way down to next best offers, social media, A/B testing. Most of that stuff is automated. There's still some creative work, sure. There's still some marketing strategy work. If you're buying a commercial for the Super Bowl, you still probably want to have a human make the decision. But if it's a relatively small decision to be made, there are just too many to leave it to the humans. And in services, we see it too. You hear a lot now about predictive maintenance, telling you that jet engine needs to be serviced now and not at a certain interval, and supplying answers to what the problem is. More and more organizations are trying to do that. So in all of these customer-facing functions, we're seeing pretty dramatic inroads by AI-based technologies. And so the question becomes, what is that? I mean, how many humans do we have in the crowd today? So hard to tell these days. But the question becomes, for us humans, what's the impact? What does it mean? And so I'm a very strong advocate of this idea of augmentation. I just wrote a book called Only Humans Need Apply, Winners and Losers in the Age of Smart Machines. And what augmentation means is that smart humans are going to be working alongside smart machines in a lot of different ways. If you're not a smart human, it may be cause for some alarm. But if you have the ability to learn new skills and learn how these machines work, you're probably going to be okay. Just as, even though chess-playing computers are now better officially than humans at playing chess, the best chess in the world is played by freestyle chess. A human with a lot of different computers in front of them saying, should I do this move or that move or that move? And the human makes the final call. So in a way, we want the work equivalent of freestyle chess. So my co-author and I developed 5 approaches to keeping your job. So, if you feel like you need to leave now, that's fine. I understand there's a lot going on. But if you'd like to keep your job, pay attention to these 5. There's stepping in, we call it. This is kind of the belly of the augmentation beast, doing work alongside the machine day to day, monitoring its performance, handling exceptions, fixing it when it goes down, maybe even improving it a little bit if you have enough understanding of how the thing works. I'll illustrate this in a second with sales-oriented jobs. Stepping up is kind of a managerial role. I always think of the prototypical hedge fund manager as a step-up role where all the stocks and bond trading in hedge funds is done by machine, but somebody looks at the entire portfolio and says, how's it going? Do we need more automation, less automation, different automation, and so on. So it's kind of a manager of automation in a sense. Stepping aside is saying, I'm not going to compete with these really smart machines. I'm going to do something that they can't really do. So there is maybe a highly creative job, empathetic job. I don't have to look very far for an example of this because my son is a TV comedy writer. Now, humans are not that great at TV comedy writing. My son is good, of course, but all the other ones are not that great. But computers are even worse, a lot worse. And so there have been a few attempts, and they're really, really lousy. So I think my son is going to be off my payroll for a while longer. So think about a job that you're not competing with these machines that can do structured and mathematical tasks so much better than we can. There's also stepping narrowly, where you do something in such a niche that nobody would be motivated to automate it. I initially thought of this. I was reading about a guy in Boston who, what he does for his job apparently pays really well. He drives a Rolls Royce around the streets of Boston. He connects buyers and sellers of Dunkin' Donuts franchises. That's it. And you think, well, computers are really good at connecting buyers and sellers of things. Why hasn't that been automated? It's just too narrow. Nobody would ever think of sitting down and writing a program that would do just that thing. So focus very narrowly if you want to be in this category. And then finally, there are going to be a lot of people building these machines. I mean, I think Salesforce has probably hired thousands of them in the last few months with its acquisition. So 5 different alternatives here for playing a role alongside these smart machines and still having something good to do. So if you think about it in terms of sales, step in could be you're very aware of how sales automation and purchasing systems work. I think you'll always have a job if you can help to improve those. Stepping up is where sales managers kind of monitor the outcomes of the entire process. Stepping aside is you focus on things that, again, machines aren't very good at. Consultative sales. The McKinsey study said real estate sales pretty safe because you got to show somebody a house. You got to make sure they don't steal the owner's stuff. Computers aren't as good at that as humans are. Stepping narrowly, that one's a little harder, but you think, well, I don't know, maybe flea market sales, or I actually found somebody who was advertising for cicada removal. And this is a tough job because it's really only valuable every 17 years, but the good news is that nobody's going to automate it. And then finally, stepping forward, you help companies like Salesforce build these new systems with your expertise in sales. So what does all this mean for sales organizations? I think you want to have people working with you, not against you, on all of these changes. So why not say from the beginning, I think the boldest companies are saying, we're not going to lay anybody off just because of this technology. We might still fire you if you're unproductive or you do something really stupid or whatever, but not because of this technology are we going to get rid of people, which inspires creativity in thinking about how we use this stuff. And maybe you get your productivity gains through attrition or something like that. Identify the areas where you think tasks can be automated. Maybe sales execution-oriented tasks as opposed to sales management-oriented tasks. Pick the right cognitive technology for your problem. There are a bunch of them out there, from natural language processing to machine learning to deep learning to rules and so on. not all of them are well suited to every purpose. So if you're going to at least develop this yourselves, make sure you're picking the right one. Do some detailed work design. Think about what are the humans going to do, what are the machines going to do, and how are they going to collaborate with each other. Give people some time to make this transition and to choose among the 5 steps and tell them what it means. You may want to put somebody in charge of this. I mean, there is going to be so much stuff coming out of Salesforce alone that you almost need a kind of a sales automation manager or marketing automation manager. In fact, these roles are starting to appear. And finally, I would say it's time to get moving on this stuff. This is not the future, this is the present. Start thinking yourself about what does this mean for your career? How can your organization take advantage of these fantastic new technologies and start getting some value today? Thank you very much.